I am glad that you are here this morning. If you don't know me, I'm Pastor Brad. I am extremely honored that you're here with us this morning, whether it's your first time, your 400th time, because the world really does vie for our attention and our time. And, I'll tell you this morning, when that alarm went off for me, I really did not want to pull myself out from under those covers. I was tired. It was cold. I just didn't want to. But there was something I wanted even more than the comfort of sleeping there under those super warm blankets. And that was getting to be with you all. And I mean that with the absolute sincerity of my heart. I am energized like nothing else to be here with you guys on a Sunday morning to gather in this place. So thank you for the honor of that. We know that you, again, have 1,000 choices, and yet you elected to be here, so thanks for that. Now, what we're going to do this morning is continue what we started last week when it comes to our message. And each week we try to share a message, a discussion from the Bible, from God's Word, what God has revealed to us and His people over the course of thousands of years and written down for us to have as our copy of what He wants us to know. We share a message from that, a teaching, a discussion. What we're doing right now is talking about an idea. The idea of, well, quite frankly, that what do we do when life is hard? And we said it's more than just when life is hard. We said life is hard. What do we do? Because we're not going to try to figure out, maybe one day it might get hard. We talked last week that the reality is life is hard, full stop. That all of us will experience that in one way or another. So what are we going to do? Last week we affirmed the fact that it happens and looked at some reasons for that. If you didn't have the opportunity to check that out, I encourage you to do it, because I think it gives some perspective for why things are going on the way they are. This week we're going to keep talking about it, but before we do, I wanted to remind us that we don't want to gloss over this fact. Maybe right now you're in a real sweet spot. Maybe everything is going golden. Your stock portfolio, if you've got one of those, is going up. Maybe things are going well for you at work and you're getting promotions and raises and affirmations, all that wonderful stuff. Maybe you're in school and you are just acing every test. Maybe things in your life are beautiful, and if so, I praise God for the blessing that is for you. But the reality is most of us aren't there. Most of us struggle through lots of different things. They can be minor annoyances through really life-altering, life-shattering things. And we need to, I think, not gloss over that as Christians. Because it's easy when things like that happen to we're not sure what to do, we want to help, so we'll do something like, oh, your child passed away. Don't worry, all things happen for a reason. Oh, don't worry, God just must have needed them more than in heaven than we needed them here on earth. I know where statements like that, I know where intentions like that come from, and it's a good place, but quite frankly, we're trying to gloss over the fact that life is hard. And we've talked about it before, if you're part of our church. There's this thing called sin that has messed everything up. We looked at that last week. It's messed up the world, it's messed up us, it's messed up others. There's all this junk, and I think we have to learn to lament a little bit. We need to just say, you know what? That stinks. I made a new friend, and some of you guys who are in our life group have met this woman. Her name is Anastasia, and she shared some of her story with us. And quite frankly, one of the things we've been doing is praying for Anastasia because her just turned 5-year-old daughter is going through chemo treatment again for leukemia because she had a bone marrow transplant that took and then failed. And they're trying to figure out what to do next. Do you think looking at Anastasia or her daughter and say, oh, don't worry, everything happens for a reason, is going to help her at all? Not one lick. Now, do I happen to believe that there is a sovereign God who, despite sin and choice and all that stuff, can sovereignly work all things because of His incredible power and goodness for good? Yes, I believe that. But in that moment, that statement doesn't help anyone. So what do we do when life is hard? Both when we're in the midst of the hardness and when others are. Well, I want to have us keep walking through this story in the Bible, this Old Testament book of Ruth. We started it last week and looked at 5 verses. This week we're going to look at a chunk more. Hopefully this is very familiar to you. Hopefully you picked up a copy of our reading plan that we provided last week. It's online. Again, you can get that on our website. I think we shared it on Facebook too. So there should be places for you to find that. If you didn't get it, grab it on the way out. It's a super simple reading plan, it's just a few verses every day. But we're going to walk through the rest of chapter 1 in this book of Ruth about the story of this woman, Naomi, and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Last week, we stepped through the fact that, well, pretty bad situation. There was a famine, moved away, went to this enemy territory. At the enemy territory, well, then husband dies. Kids get married, the 2 sons, then they die. So there's this woman in a foreign land who fled from her hometown to her enemy's land. Husbands died, sons have died, and she's left with these 2 foreign daughters-in-law. And what do we do? And we just said, man, that's a stinky situation, not the start to like your favorite rom-com, okay? So once this has happened, this is where we go next. This is starting in verse 6 of chapter 1 in the book of Ruth. Then she arose with her daughter-in-laws, and this is Naomi, rose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. This idea of visiting the people, it gives a sense that what was happening, the famine that was in the land, most likely was a result of some level of disobedience by God's people, because God had promised to provide for his people and care for them if they would maintain and walk in righteousness and right relationship with him. So the presence of the famine, it gives sense that maybe in this situation that Israel had been going in some bad directions. Now they were turning back, they were repenting, turning to the Lord, and the Lord visits and gives food to them, that God's favor is resting again on the land of Israel, the people of Israel. So it says that she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi, now so they're on their way, it says here, but Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead, her husband and her sons, and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Now their husbands had died, so she's saying, so that you can get married again. Because that was in this land, in this time, that was the only real hope that women could have, especially women who were widowed, was to find another husband, another spouse. It says, then she kissed them and they wept, she kissed them and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, verse 11, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. And if I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, now understand that this is a story that's compacted. So while Ruth is holding on to her, Orpah here has already left, has already returned. It says, she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. See, what Naomi was telling them is they were following out of this sense of duty and some level of love for Naomi. But to go with her was to go to their enemy's land and to say, I'm going to reject all that I have from home and go to this enemy's land, already in a position of, in that time, that place of shame of being widows. So it was not on the surface, it was not a wise choice for them. So that's why Naomi's, no, go back home. Orpah listens, kisses her, says thank you, heads back home. And it says to her people and to her gods, go back to the life you know, the comfortable life, what you are familiar with, because the road ahead is difficult and life is hard. So go back to what's comfortable to you. And I would suggest that that's one of the temptations for us when life gets hard, is to return to what is comfortable, and if it's not comfortable, to what's familiar. When life is hard, I can't handle change. I can't handle what I don't know, the unknown. I will just retreat back to what is already known. This is what Orpah did. But look here how Ruth replies to Naomi. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said, no more. This is an incredible statement. And it can be easy to miss, because for us to say, hey, yeah, I'll go with you, that's like, hey, I'll hop in the car and drive to Domino's. You'll get a slice and then I'll come home. The idea of just going with someone it's very commonplace to us, but they are traveling a significant distance in not a good economic situation for themselves. They don't have resources. They are shunned because of their condition in their society at the time. And yet Ruth says, I will go with you. Where you stay, wherever we end up, I will be with you. That your people, the people of Israel, who are supposed to be my enemies, I have seen something in you that makes me reject what I have known and step into something that I recognize as better. She says that your God will be my God. You don't understand that in this culture, that was an incredibly powerful statement for someone to make, to reject the gods of your family, to reject the gods of your people, because they had this very eye for eye, tooth for tooth, cause and effect, very direct view of deity, which meant for her to reject the gods of Moab meant that she was in essence saying, all your wrath come upon me. And there is a reason she was willing to do that, because she had seen the hand of God. Remember, it said that the Lord had visited his people while they heard about this, while they were in the fields of Moab. To have heard about in the fields of Moab, to say, man, that is a good situation's happening, that you're hearing that good is happening in your enemy's land. Remember, there's no cell phones. There's no internet. There's no postal service. It's not like they caught it on the nightly news. People were walking and saying, have you heard what God is doing? Have you heard what that people, what that land is going through? I don't understand it. Something good is happening there. And she saw it, she believed, she rejected all she had known. She said so much to the point that only death, I will be buried where you are buried, with the likelihood that you will die before me, which means even after you die, I will stay. I am choosing this for me, that this is the greatest thing that I can do, is to reject what I've known and step into what God has for me. And so the story goes that two of them went on, verse 19, and they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women said, is this Naomi? Remember, they had been gone for at least a decade, probably significantly longer, because they had fled when famine struck. And she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. And that word Mara is the same word as bitterly. She's literally saying, call me bitterness. And in the Bible, just as kind of a little side note, names meant a little something different. Okay, there was significance given to names a little bit beyond what we understand. A great example is in Genesis 35, the story of Jacob and Rachel's son, Benjamin, being born. And it says that while she was in labor with him, it was a hard labor, so much so that it eventually killed her. Okay? It was a very hard labor. And as she felt her soul departing, it says that she named her son Ben-Ani. Not Benjamin, but Ben-Ani. Now, that might not strike you, but it actually means son of my lament, or son of my evil, or son of the evil that has come to me. If you're thinking of having a child and coming up with a name, I would probably avoid son of evil, okay? That's probably not the best one. But it says that Jacob, after this happened, renamed his son, not Ben-Ani, son of my lament, but Benjamin, that is son that is highly regarded. And we find out later in the story that he gave this name to her because he cherished her, because this was the last son that his beloved wife had given to him. And when he saw his son, he saw his wife. So there was significance and power given to names in this culture. So for her to say, don't call me Naomi. For me right now, my life is so hard, you can just call me bitterness, because that's what I feel. This is the situation that they're left in. She goes on and keeps explaining. She says, I went away full and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, we're going to get to the significance of the barley harvest next week. Maybe a little hook there for you to come back and find out what's going on with the story here. But I hope you can see, walking through this part of the story, that life is hard for Naomi and life is hard for Ruth. They are not in a good spot. But once life got hard and Ruth was faced with the choice to go back to what was familiar or to push ahead to what she had come to know as the better, as the greater, she made a choice. And I think it's a similar choice that we need to make. So when life is hard, I think we need to do at least three things. And that is, we need to find something greater than our situations. We see that Ruth did this. She was willing to push into something that was, yes, unfamiliar, but it would be greater than the very situation she was walking through. There's a story in 2 Kings where a certain prophet was letting the enemies of Israel, was letting Israel know that their enemies were going to be certain places and do certain things. So they were providing intel on what the enemy was doing. And the enemy found out about this and goes, oh, let's kill this prophet. And they sent their army to destroy this prophet. This is in 2 Kings 6. And when you get to verse 15, here's what you read. It says, when the servant of the man of God, the servant of this prophet, rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? All right, we're going to contemporize this. It's, oh crap, what are we going to do? That's what alas means, okay? It's, I'm in trouble. What's going on? They're here for us. That's the story. That's the situation, right? Not a great one. And here's what this prophet says, okay? And this is the prophet Elisha. He says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. There's an army around us. Yeah, don't be afraid. That do not be afraid or do not fear is the most repeated commandment in all of Scripture. It says, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And the servant's looking around. It's the two of us. It's an army. Then Elijah prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Now, what I'm not saying that this passage means is that if you could just open your eyes, that there's literally this angelic force of fiery beings ready to smite every enemy around you. But what I do think this is telling us as a principle is that what God is trying to help us understand is that we cannot see everything that's going on. That there's way more going on in a situation, way more than we're aware of, and that God is in control. Now, for where you're at, you might go, well, I'm not sure I even believe in God. Okay. I hope we're gonna be able to present some compelling direction for you that would change that. But I think the principle that also applies is that we need to remember in our situations that there needs to be something outside of it. We can get so locked into our situation, we see nothing but the situation. Okay, I heard a story where a guy was talking about a glass of water. And if I had a pint glass of water and it was full, Harold, how heavy would you think that pint glass would be? Half a pound, okay. All right, let's see. Emily, how heavy would you say it would be? A pound. Okay, who else can I pick on? Jafari. I love picking on you, brother. How heavy do you think it would be? You got to pick a number. 7/8. Yes. Here's the thing. For the point of discussion, it actually doesn't matter how heavy it is. The point of the matter is any one of us could walk up to a pint glass of water and pick it up, right? And if I told you to hold it for 5 minutes, it would be no Herculean feat, right? But if I told you to hold it like this for an hour, even though the weight of the glass had not changed, how would your arm begin to feel? What if I told you to hold it just like that for 24 hours? Your arm would go numb, would probably be paralyzed in place. Though the weight of that glass of water didn't change. The substance of the glass of water didn't change. In fact, just due to evaporation, it might have even gotten a little bit lighter. But you are in pain and locked up over it because the situation, when you focus on just that situation, just the weight of that, it can become paralyzing to you. And the thing is, what God wants us to know is there are things outside of the situation going on, and we need to find the greater. I want to suggest that God is the greater, and that he expresses that greatness through his called out people to exhibit, to exude that power into the world around us, to bring his power to bear over the situations. And as a side note, it's very interesting because I'm sure the servant was like, yes, they're going to get smitten now. Smited? Smitten? One of those two, smited or smitten, okay? Smoted. Smote? Smote. They were smotened. One of them has to be right. This is what the servant wants, right? And when this happens, it says that Elisha went out and said, God, give them blindness. Don't hurt them, give them blindness. And he blinded them, and then Elisha leads them away. And once he leads them into Samaria, into the land of the king of Israel. And the king of Israel goes, all right, do I get to kill him now? And Elisha goes, no, feed them and send them on their way. They have been shown that they're defeated. It's just a very interesting thing that the power of God released by this fiery angels, they didn't light anyone on fire. Nobody was cut down. And when the king of Israel had the chance to smite his enemies, instead he was told, no, show them compassion and grace and mercy, benefit them, give good to them and send them on their way. It's such a reversal of how we're maybe naturally inclined to go. So when life is hard, we need to find something greater than our situation. But I think we also need to find something greater than ourselves. We have, especially in our American culture, this bootstrap idea, yank yourself up. I can make it if I just try hard enough. And the thing is, we can't, okay? The thing is, we need something outside of us, something that is greater than us. And again, whether you believe in God at this point in your life or not, you have to come to the point of recognizing that, quite frankly, all of us are incapable of actually doing everything we need, and we radically need others. I think we find that in the community, I think especially the community of God's family, but in God himself is the greater that we can find. Look here at Psalm 147. It says this, the Lord heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. It says he determines the number of the stars. He gives to all of them their names. Do you know how many stars are estimated are in the universe? At least 4, yes. Trillions upon trillions. Okay, I remember working in different classrooms. I struggled to remember the names of like 20 kids. God determines the very number of the stars and then knows the name of every single one of them. That is incredible. It says, great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure. What is greater than us? There's nothing greater than the one who formed us. And if we learn what it means to trust in him, not just to acknowledge that he exists. There's an interesting passage in the book of James in our New Testament that says, you believe that God is one. You believe in God? Awesome. So do the demons. And they're terrified by the idea. Just believing that God exists is not enough. It's what does it mean? What is your standing with this God that you believe in? Is it one of being cherished by and loved by and part of the family of because that's what's offered? Or are we going to choose to turn away from that? To bear it on our own. See, the thing is, we do need to find something greater than ourselves because when we try to bear it on our own, we fall and we buckle under the pressure. That's not a slam on you that you are insufficient. It is a simple statement of reality that all of humanity, myself included, you included, are incapable of bearing all the burdens of this life on your own. You need the strength of others, and primarily you need the strength of the one who made you. But I also want to suggest that in addition to finding something greater than ourselves or greater than our situations, we need to find something greater than our despair. Man, the world around us, stuff is broken and breaking. Things do not go the way that we plan or dream. And that doesn't mean that everything is terrible and everything is rotten and nothing is good. But quite frankly, it is so easy for despair to creep in, to let the hard parts of life eat and erode away at the joy that can be ours. And this is true regardless of where you stand, regardless of how good of a person you are. If you're familiar with the Bible, we have the Old Testament where we've looked at like Isaiah and some of these other things where the book of Ruth is, but there's also this New Testament, the newer part. This is the start part that talks about this man, Jesus. And half of the books, over half the books of this New Testament part of our Bible were written by a guy named Paul. Okay, had this incredible, dramatic encounter with Jesus on a roadway. He was blinded. Then he had things like scales falling off his eyes when he was healed. And then this man who was persecuting this newfound Christian faith became the greatest proponent to the non-Jewish world of the message of the gospel, the message of Jesus. And in one of his letters, the second letter we have of his that was recorded to the church at Corinth, he talks about the fact that he had been given incredible revelations. And he's like, in a very humble way, but it's like, I don't even want to speak of it, but God gave me this incredible revelation to understand truth or whatnot. And then he says this is in chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians. He says, to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations. He's recognizing this is amazing stuff beyond what I can explain or I don't even deserve. It's wonderful, it's incredible, and I'm working hard to serve you. He says, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me. Now that thorn, there's different discussions of what that is. Some believe that was apparently Paul had a degenerative eye condition, and he thinks that maybe it was that. Or some think because it's a messenger of Satan that maybe this was those who directly opposed the message and what Paul was trying to do. These were people who were persecuting him. But it says that this was given to him to keep me from becoming conceited. Even someone in that good spot, man, it's easy to get puffed up on ourselves. I think it's one of the reasons why we do need to recognize not only do we need to find something greater than ourselves, we need to recognize we need something greater than ourselves because our natural inclination is to think much of ourselves. And it says that, in fact, 3 times he pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave him, whatever it is. And I guarantee you, he actually talked to God about it more than 3 times, but this is the idea, like, there were 3 times where I was in concentrated effort, begging God to remove this, and yet God said no. Look here, look at the response. It says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. The goodness that I give to you is sufficient, even in light of this. For my power is made perfect in weakness. This is one that just doesn't seem to fit in our culture. No, power is not made perfect in weakness. Power is made perfect in more power. When I can fully and utterly obliterate what opposes me, that is the perfection of power. But what God says to Paul, this cherished, beloved leader of his church, he says, my power is made perfect in your weakness. And this is a principle we need to understand why we don't despair, because in the places that would lead us to despair is the places where God's power is most radically manifest. He says his grace is sufficient for these. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses so that the power of Christ, the power of the author of the universe may rest on me. It doesn't say that when you're good enough, smart enough, when you do enough Jesus-y stuff, when you're at church enough or give enough or serve enough or whatever it is, once you're good enough, God's power will rest on you. It says no. The manifestation of God's power happens in our weakness. Verse 10, for the sake of Christ, then I am content. Look what he's content with. Weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. How many of us can say that? Somehow Paul can say this. He looks and says, life is radically hard, and yet I can be content with all of it because he recognizes that in the midst of that, God's power rests on him. What defeats despair? When you're connected to power. True power comes here when I am weak. He says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Because when I am standing in my weakness, that means God's power is manifest and flowing out. So, when life is hard, what do we need to do? We need to find something that's greater than our situation, something that's greater than ourselves, and something that's greater than our despair. I believe the Bible teaches us, and I believe a faithful message in this way, that we can look at the world around us, we can look at the history of humanity, see that it points to the fact that God is the greater, that life is hard, but God is the greater. Don't miss that. Don't think that if I can just find this one other thing, because quite frankly, other things will let us down. Hebrews 12, we looked at this in one of our previous messages called Unshaken. But we're told to lift our drooping hands and strengthen our weak knees, make straight paths for our feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but may be healed. Therefore, let us be grateful. This is for those now who have trusted in Jesus to pay their price of sin. It says, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. What is the greater? It's being a participant in a kingdom that can never be shaken by the things of this world. We get a coronavirus and our world shuts down for 2.5 years. God's kingdom is not shaken in the midst of it. Jesus was not caught by surprise, and he never changed in the midst of it all. So let me ask just a couple questions, because we're going to be wrapping up here. What is the greater that I will go to? There are some things that represent God's greatness, and that's good, and they're the good and right things to go to. But at the end of it all, what's the greater? Because I will look to things that, quite frankly, are inferior and think them to be greater. So is that the greater that you're turning to, is it actually the greater, or is it a counterfeit one? Is it something that kind of makes you feel better, but isn't in the end actually going to be that thing that you can fully rely on? Again, I would suggest the Bible teaches, and history itself reinforces the truth of the idea that God is the greatest. And one of the other things that we've learned, we went through last January a series called the Imago Dei, talking that we represent God in the image he has made us in. It says that all of us are made in his image, and that image is representing him and acting according to his character and his nature. So if that's the case, how am I a channel of God's greatness into the lives of others? When life is hard for others, what are you doing to show off God's greatness in their lives? What am I doing to show off God's greatness in their lives? So lastly, I'll just say this, and again, we're going to sing a song here in just a moment. Have you found the greatest greater? Have you come to that place? Do you know this man Jesus that we talk about, that we make much of? When I hoot and holler about this thing called the gospel, and what's the gospel, church? Good news. It's the greatest news because it's about the greatest greater. The ultimate great that we can turn to. Have you found it? If you haven't, I really beg you to talk to me before you leave. I would have no greater joy than to introduce you to the one who not only formed the very universe you exist in, but made everything possible for you to be restored and healed in him. Let me invite you to that if you don't know it. If you do, be that channel of greatness in others' lives.